Mayor James J. Fiorentini, the longest running mayor, 8 terms in the history of the city, is now running for his 9th term, and we're very pleased to have him with us here today to answer more questions on the upcoming election. Welcome to the program, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks for having me, Frank. How you been?
Very good. If you could tell me and tell our viewing audience and the voters, when you take a look at when you started in your tenure as mayor, the circumstances were different then than they are now.
Absolutely.
Okay, and that being the case, what are the priorities now that may be the top 3 priorities that have to be addressed now that were not so evident when you happened to start, understanding that things evolve?
Well, they were evident when I started, but education, public safety, and infrastructure improvement are the 3 things that I want to tackle if I'm fortunate enough to be reelected. When I started, the city was in very dire straits. 2 of our state representatives said that receivership was the only option for us. One of the fire stations, the Bradford Fire Station, was closed. The library was slated to be closed. Our high school was on accreditation probation. We had the lowest bond rating of any city in the entire state, and we had no reserves of any type. We had the largest municipal debt in the history of the Commonwealth. We've made an incredible turnaround. $250 million in new investment downtown. We went from the largest municipal debt in the history of the entire state to the largest surplus in our history. Our high school has been fully accredited, our library is fully accredited, and all of our fire stations are reopened. We now have some money to tackle some long-term projects that we didn't have before. This year, we're putting $1.7 million extra, in addition to the money the state gives us, into fixing our roads and sidewalks. We will make the largest infrastructure investment in our history this year. We've added 22 police officers over the past 5 years. I think we need more. We need to fill all of our vacancies, put the cops back on the street, make certain we're safe. Crime is down according to the FBI statistics, but I don't feel it. I want the public to feel it. I want them to know that we're working carefully on this. And finally, education. We're making great strides in education. The Tilton School this year was one of the highest improved schools in the whole state, 2 years in a row, actually. We want that same progress for every one of our schools. We won't rest until our whole city is a top-performing school system. We did all of these things without taxing people to the max, with keeping a reasonable tax rate, and that's where I want to go.
Can you tell us what some of the biggest challenges you had as mayor coming to this point right now? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of the biggest ones was, in order to reduce overall costs relative to the city budget, were to get everybody on the same page relative to an insurance program, and that did not go over in a very big way with the members that were affected.
There were employees still mad at me, unions still mad at me, who have picketed my house at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, picketed fundraisers that I've been at, picketed City Hall. But I had to do what I had to do in order to save this city from bankruptcy or receivership and get us back on a strong financial course. That took strict fiscal discipline, saying no to good people making good requests, but it's what we had to do to turn the city around. Only experienced leadership can do that, and that's what I bring to the table.
When you talked just a moment ago about saying no to good people that maybe had an alternate point of view, oftentimes it is said that the longer a state person happens to be in office, the more times he has to say no. And the more times he has to say no, that translates into an anti-vote for you, and more so for your other candidate. You're more than a student of politics. You've been in the mix for several years.
I don't find that to be the case. It's actually easier. It's harder and it's easier. I only needed one word my first couple of terms in order to govern the city, the word no. And I had to say no to a lot of people that wanted a lot of things, and that was the only way to be. We had no reserves of any type. Some lights went out at the parking deck downtown. I couldn't fix them. I'd have to lay somebody off to fix them. In order to get us to the point where we are today, where we have adequate reserves, where we had the largest surplus in our history last year, I had to say no. I had to adopt the philosophy that Tom Menino adopted in Boston. I will never give in to unreasonable demands. And that's the position that I've taken.
When you talk about reserves, what are the reserves do we have right now in the city of Haverhill, and what do you have in mind for those reserves as a set aside, as a safety net?
Those are safety nets. Those are safety nets. We don't know when the next recession will be, but we know with absolute certainty that there will be one. The business cycle hasn't been repealed. It'll happen. Things will go down. The last time that things went down, which slightly after I took office, I had the hail debt the first couple of years, and then we had the recession. When things go down, your revenues go down. State aid goes down. We still haven't recovered from the cut in school aid that took place around 2008. And local aid goes down. Your local receipts, like the meals tax receipt, excise tax receipts, they all go down, and you have to have adequate reserves in order to bridge the storm. Now, adequate reserves aren't going to take you through the depression,
right,
but adequate reserves will get you over a small bump, and that's what we need. That's why with Standard & Poor's, we have the highest management rating that any city in the country can have, because we've said no, we exercise strict fiscal discipline, and we've been able to tax for the last 4 years below the max to keep our people in Haverhill with a reasonable and affordable city.
Do you think that with the reserves, the amount of reserves that the city happens to have right now, which is what?
Well, we have $5 million in stabilization, $5.5 million, and we had $13 million, 12.8 actually, in what's called free cash. We used about half of that in the budget, and we put some over until next year, so that whatever happens next year will be okay.
I asked that question with how well the city happens to be run relative to state aid. Does the state take a look at that and say, well, if they have $5 million in reserves and they've got this so that we don't have to give them as much as we've done?
Do they punish you for being a well-managed city?
Well, I'm just asking.
No, they don't, and I'm happy to say that. There is something to that, though. When I took office, I took office the same day as the mayor of Springfield. We were tied with Springfield for having the lowest bond rating in the state, not exactly where you want to be.
Correct.
And Governor Romney was in office when I took office. They had a recession, and Governor Romney in February, a month after I took office, announced that there would be big local aid cuts. I talked to the mayor of Springfield and said, well, what are we going to do? I have no reserves. I can't meet this cut. I have to lay people off. And he said, don't lay anybody off. Keep going. The state will bail you out. I said, well, I don't want that. I don't want that reputation for my city. I don't want to go into bankruptcy or receivership. We'll make the tough decisions. Springfield didn't. They didn't make the tough decisions. They kept going, and around April or May, they no longer had money to pay their employees. Their teachers went 3 weeks without a paycheck. The state did come in and bail them out. And so there is something to what you say. But I don't want that reputation for my city. I want a city where investors come and know that we're well-run, well-managed, and they're prepared to make investments here. And I'd like to think that's one of the reasons we have $250 million in new investment in our downtown.
You have a reputation for being rather tight-fisted when it comes to expenditures and budget items.
I'm proud of it.
And that's okay. That being the case, how does that translate to the fact that there's been a great concern voiced over a period of the past couple of weeks, and there have been diametrically opposed views relative to the over 80 teachers that have departed? For different locations and for different jobs? Is that because? And I'm amazed that there wasn't enough. There wasn't a lot of information relative to the exit interviews as to why they did leave. Was it because of getting a higher pay in another location? Isn't that one of the some of the people that happen to be in office in city council that you govern with have said it's troubling? On the other hand, other people have said that's normal, and
it is normal. I am frugal, and I'm tight-fisted, and I'm very careful with the taxpayers' dollars. That's why for 4 years in a row, we've been able to tax below the max, and people's taxes today are $3 million lower than the maximum that they could be. A couple of $100 for each residential taxpayer in the city. The one place that I haven't been frugal with is the schools. Over the last 4 years, they've received about a $15 million increase in their budget. They've had very steep increases the last 2 or 3 years. The teachers leaving is about the normal attrition rate. When teachers leave, it's a combination of teachers retiring, teachers whose contract wasn't renewed, teachers who moved out of the district. And we're at about average. It's called an attrition rate. Our attrition rate is about at the state average. It's higher than it was by a little bit a year ago and a little bit lower than it was 2 years ago. So I don't see anything alarming there. Where I have been concerned is at the attrition rate at the high school. The high school is where we need our top stars. We need our most empathetic people in the lower grades. We need our top stars at the high school. And I've asked the superintendent to take a look at those numbers and see if it's anything we need to take a look at.
With an idea toward if the teachers are in high school, this is the last chance before they depart for whether higher education or the job market, right?
That doesn't usually happen. Some people go to the job market. Very few high school teachers go on to teaching.
I'm talking about the students that they...
Oh, the students.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's because
you
usually...
want your academic stars at the high school.
Mm-hmm.
You want the most empathetic people in the lower grades. And by the way, we have wonderful teachers. I go around to every school every year, and I'm very impressed with our teachers.
Mayor, I would like to ask you this question, because we've had this conversation before in years past, and I've asked you relative to the landfill and the tipping fees and the trash collection and the recycling, things of that type.
Well, I'm worried about recycling.
Well, you had mentioned to me that the trash circumstance is Ogden Martin. That circumstance is like the large elephant in the room nobody wants to talk about because there's a certain life expectancy for that landfill.
I don't know what it is, but it's years and years down the road.
Down the road? Okay.
Yeah, so
But go ahead about the recycling.
Well, recycling no longer pays us money. We have a very good contract we negotiated where we don't lose too much money on recycling, but recycling no longer pays, it costs. It's actually more expensive to dispose of recycling than it is to dispose of trash. And if it weren't for the environmental aspects of recycling, a lot of people would discontinue it. But we've got to turn that around. That's all because China no longer takes our recyclables because so many of them were polluted. So there are people, unfortunately, in the city who leave trash in their recycling box. They leave food. They know what they're doing. They do it on purpose. And those little things really add up to the point where a lot of recycling throughout the country is contaminated, and China simply stopped taking it. We've got to turn that around so we can sell recycling again.
I'd like to ask you this question relative to taxes. And it's kind of it might be a delicate question, but when you take a look at 21,000, just got 2 minutes left, but 21,700 some odd properties, parcels of property in the city of Haverhill. Of those, 830 or more are tax exempt. Once you deduct city-owned property and once you deduct places of worship, that still may leave hundreds more of tax-exempt properties. There's a circumstance whereby you have payment in lieu of taxes.
We've written to every one of them, and they've all indicated they're not required to pay, and they won't. I think
Correct.
that's it.
But how do you feel about that? Because we're talking about hundreds, and I understand they make a contribution to society and the community.
You're talking about the YMCA, the Red Cross, the United Fund. You're talking about the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, Boys Club, and they do make a contribution to our society.
So you don't think that there's, while they're not obligated to be able to do this, when you take a look at sometimes, not everybody, when you take a look at some of these budgets, it's an interesting item.
I don't think it's an avenue worth going down.
Okay.
There's only a certain amount of time we have them. And our avenue is best going down, improving education, public safety, and infrastructure. Those are the three things I want to take care of. I want to give people great roads and great sidewalks. We don't have that today. We're making progress. We're going to have the biggest investment in our roads and sidewalks in our history, but we need to do more, and that's one of the reasons I'm running. Our schools are making progress, but we need to do better, and that's one of the reasons that I'm running. and we need to do better with public safety. We have a great police force. I'm very, very proud of them. We had an incident on Jackson Street Extension, and within 10 minutes, they caught the people responsible. A phenomenal job. But I don't want these incidents in my city. So we need to fill the vacancies in the police department, get more police out on the street, get people walking the beat, and we need to stop these things.
Thank you very much for being here. Mayor
Thank you.
James J. Fiorentini, running for his 9th term for the city of Haverhill.
Thank you very much, Frank.
We hope that this program has been a point of reference for you. And until next time, my name is Frank Novak, and thanks very much for watching. And remember to vote on Election Day, Tuesday, November 5th.